Hello, friends. My name is Mia Park. Welcome to my interview series. This is called In Response, interviews with intriguing internalizers. Internalizers, easy for me to say, internalizers are people who I think have interesting things to share with the world because they're responding to the world in unique, thoughtful, deeper ways. I've been talking to artists and spiritual people and office workers who have interesting perspectives on things, all kinds of people. So today I'm really excited that my special guest, my friend, longtime collaborator who I'm interviewing is Mr. Tatsu Aoki.
Hello,
Yay!
hello, everybody. This is Tatsu Aoki speaking, and thank you for having me. I am in my studio here, in the basement of my studio, where all the creation happens.
So you can see the vibes back there where the magic happens, right?
No, oh yeah,
Uh,
thank you. Right.
Yeah, so Tatsu, I want to take a minute to introduce you. First of all, Tatsu and I have known each other for over 20 years. We have been working together in different capacities. Tatsu is a multi-dimensional artist and very successful and deep in all of his dimensions. I know, Tatsu, you are or were teaching at the Art Institute in experimental film because you are an experimental filmmaker. You're also a composer. You're also a performer, not only playing the upright bass, but also playing several traditional Japanese instruments. As a composer, you've put together several kinds of bands, one of which I played in, the Big Band Miyumi project, which was so much fun. That was a great year. I guess we found out that was 14 years ago, or was that 16 years ago? I can't
It's
remember.
probably more than that. I just saw you on the videotape yesterday on our live casting because we did a special program on the Miyumi project, 20-year Miyumi project anniversary. So I think when you came in on the big band, that was probably, you're right, 18 years ago. And because I looked at the video and everybody looked so younger.
I know,
You
I
you
know.
still look young, but younger.
Yeah, I we all were younger then. We're wiser now. But so yeah, Tatsu's been a mover and shaker, not only in the Asian American art scene, but the advocacy scene, and also again in the filmmaking scene and on the jazz scene, and in so many different ways. So welcome, Tatsu. Is
Thank
there
you.
anything else? Hey, is there anything else you would like people to know about you?
Well, I am healthy and safe. So that's all I can say about us. And thank God. And I'm very thankful that I am, even though things are on the stream, I am thankful that we are able to do what we do for the time being. And hopefully come back to the real world with a live, presentation soon. But we're good.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So that actually, what you just said leads me into the next couple questions, which is if first next question is if you wouldn't mind sharing with us what the outside world looks like to you, and then share what your internal response is. And before you respond, I want to share that today is September 1st, 2020. So people understand the context of where we're coming from. We're both around the Chicago area, and we're still in the middle of this health pandemic of COVID-19, and very much so, especially in the Chicago area with Kenosha and Chicago, in the pandemic of racial injustice. So, what do you think?
Well, maybe should we relate to the outside world, inside world first, or should we go
Yeah,
into
sure.
the
That's all.
okay?
It's the whole thing. Yep,
So
it's the
so
whole
the
thing.
whole question about the outside world, to me, the outside world means if I step out of my little circle here, that's everything else is outside world. So mainly my outside world is this room here with the studio with everything else in the back here. I do music and composing and everything. Then I go out to my bigger studio for traditional practices with a group of people. Then my mental outside world this is a very strange thing. It's Tokyo because everything I do musically relates to my background and training in Tokyo and the traditional music as well as things I did as a teenager in Tokyo. So three outside world, studio here and my bigger studio, which is in Chicago, then the Tokyo. And that all relates to my outside connections. And a
That's
little bit of San Francisco, because I go to San Francisco. My musical, I think, inspiration is from my studio to Chicago to Tokyo to San Francisco, and it's been rotating around that.
That's great. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that outside world. And like we said before you responded that way, that's all in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of a pandemic. So what's your internal response to all those many outside layers?
Right. So the internal response is that I think your original question talked about the internal space, what my internal space. So internal space is a sound for me. And sound is such an interesting thing. Sound can imply the space. And sound implies the space, and that ultimately becomes a music I play. So, for instance, if you close your eye and if you hear the sound of the water, you have this idea of a location immediately by the sound. But that's an example of the natural sound. But I could do the same kind of transposition in the concept of my spiritual location by the sound of the instruments I play. And ultimately, that gets together and become a music. That's how my internal space is always revolving. And I also like to do nothing. So, sometimes I just don't do anything, and I close my eye and enjoy the empty space, where the location is not really implied. So that's also important space for me. That's my
Thanks.
internal world.
That's amazing. I'm really encouraged hearing you say that you do what you're calling nothing, because you're very accomplished. And, you and I are like hustlers. It's like what so many projects going on, and each project is vitally as important as the one next to it.
Right.
And so you've always been wonderful at being so accomplished that way. And you've always been pretty deep. One thing I've always appreciated about you, and I feel like I can identify, is that I want to go back to addressing this issue of racism that's happening now.
Right.
Like, you're straight shooter. You've always just said it as it is, and calling it what it is. So we were talking before we went live about the interesting position we're in as Asian Americans in view of the racial pandemic right now, especially with African Americans at the forefront. Do you have more to say about that, or do you feel like sharing what we were talking about?
As we sort of talked about it, Mia, that we completely are in solidarity with everything that is happening, and we hate what's happening. But also, I think what's important about that is that as much as our Asian American being one of the invisible nation, we don't exactly exist in the mainstream world as an Asian American. They have Asians, but they don't really have a place for Asian American. So that itself is a little bit of a struggle for us to deal with, because we still don't have a what do you call it, proper social position as a part of the society, I feel. And this is what's been going on for my activism in the Asian American arts. I could only do this through the arts, so I try to advocate that statue with the art, music and performance and whatnot. But I think politically, we also have to be aware of that. And so on top of what's happening here with the white people and the black people, and we are right in the middle of this war against the racism. And it's a little, I think don't you think it's a little bit of a tricky position for us?
I do, yeah. Can you say more about being in the middle of racism for people who may not?
I think the racism existed uh, all this time. And of course, the majority of the time that we're fighting against the mainstream. So the white people's racism against people of the color, but we also have the racism from the people of the color about being an Asian. So let's, as an activist, I always say, like, let's not forget that part either, right? So because we are being punished for who we are as being an Asian American. So someone like me, I came in to this country as an uh, Asian immigrant. So when you are Asian, I think things are a little cooler, because I think the majority of the people, and also some of the major minority people, have a better respect for something being Asian, that's something that came from Asia. Then the time passes and you become part of this really interesting Asian American diaspora. That's when we start to lose the respect and the position of the society. So I've been very much outspoken about this Asian American cultural diaspora, and have the respect of our identity in the society, and us to be placed in a proper position.
Thanks for that. Um, so I want to go back to how you described responding internally through different levels of space, whether
Mhm.
space is sound or lack of sound.
Right.
Do you face the other parts of the outside world that way? Like you're just talking about advocacy and
Uh-huh.
how we're, as a demographic, we're kind of stuck between these worlds.
Right.
Like, does that also musically inform you, or how sound wise internally do you respond to that issue?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that you say this. That a lot of the stuff that I talk about is, I mean, it eventually becomes a music I play, but it's usually the sound that I am mostly intrigued by. So I think one may identify these as a notes I play, uh, either on the taiko drum or either on shamisen lute or the bass. That it's a notes I play, but it really is about the sound and sequences of the sound that I create becomes the uh, music. It becomes a phrase, and the phrase becomes a space, and the space becomes a music. So it's kind of like very interesting intertwined process. I recently just discovered that myself, maybe about 10-15 years ago, because I have a very what do you say? Very much of a less technique as a upright bassist if you compare to someone like a great jazz player. I always admire looking at the other bassist in the on the other side of the stage, with the um, while we're waiting for our turn. I always look at their bassist, go, oh my God, that's really wonderful. They have all these facilities, and which I don't have that, because I am very much of a singular sound oriented musician. So I have a very less notes. It's kind of like a very fundamental basic notes. And I joke about myself being, hey guys, I only play two notes. But it's kind of like that. Um, so hopefully, I'm always hoping that conceptual conceptual space that I create inside of me turns into the music in the outside world. And that is suggesting something, hopefully, sometimes political ideas that I have, or sometimes social ideas I have. And all that stuff is really intertwined in this process.
Oh, that's great. As artists, I think, we have to have an authentic presence in the work we create, and we can never control how it lands on people. I'm
Right,
glad to hear your intention that your art, your music, and the space that turns into sound, that turns into music for you, has that intention.
right. And,
I
and,
just
you
want to
know, yeah, a lot of times it's about who we are. So I think it's visually very obvious about my Asian American identity and advocacy that I present, because like the parts that you participated. Like I have a Mia Park playing the drum. I have all these horn sections and violinists that are all Asian Americans or Asians, and I have a black people participating on this ensemble, and that itself is a political statement on top of the music, that unique music we create.
Yeah, that was a fun project. That was great. Hey, I want to give a shout out really quick to Yoli, my
Yes.
dear friend. She just would say some comments about the construct of whiteness and how the construct of whiteness loves exotification, which is true.
Right.
And also, she just wants to comment that the space becomes the music, and that she's really in agreement with that. So thanks for chiming in, Yoli.
Oh yeah. Constructive whiteness loves exotification is that's the Asian stereotype. Like you guys have to be exotic, submissive Asian female with a long black
Of
hair.
course.
That's right. Or us guys, we always have to be a funny Chinaman to have this. So that's also the very, very true. Yoli.
Very true. Or Bruce Lee. Don't forget, you also have pressure to be Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan.
Yeah. But Jackie Chan plays as a funny Bruce Lee.
That's right.
But Bruce Lee is a dangerous man.
He was, and they killed him. So I think it's just amazing how after decades and decades of these stereotypes, like we're in our middle age now, and we're still dealing with that after, decades of the stereotyping. So we just, we keep on keeping on.
Right. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask. You talked about the art that you create, and you saying that you have hope that the art inspires people, perhaps politically or perhaps other ways. Mm-hmm. Do you have a lot of trust or hope in the future in general?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think yes. I think it's more of, I would like to believe our intelligence and intellectual understanding as a human being, that I want to believe that we are better than the way we have it today, right? Especially right now with all these racial justice and all these issues. I think we are better than that. We can do this and understand each other and respect each other. So I would like to be hopeful. And my hope is this. I hope the younger generation don't have to deal with this. So when they come to the world as a grown-up people, there's no more argument about Asian this, white this, black this, And I think we can do this. I have this theory of salad bowl, Mia. So one time I had a discussion on the racial activism about the melting pot. And my statement there was that I don't actually believe in the melting pot, because if you melt your pot, you lose your identity. And salad bowl, if you have a salad bowl, you can be a cucumber, you can be a tomato, you can be a lettuce, and they're all kind of mixed together. And you enjoy the lettuce, you enjoy the cucumber, and you enjoy the tomato for what it is. But together, it creates this wonderful salad. So I would like to hope that we become like a salad bowl. Each of the identities protected and respected and enjoyed. So that's my hope.
Oh, that's great. I love the salad bowl metaphor. Do you mind if I order a pizza instead? Because we can have everything on a salad and a pizza, and it'll still be delicious.
Yeah.
Okay.
So salad. The pizza is not really good for my cholesterol at this age, But I sometimes like pizza.
Okay, we could. Well, whatever it is, it's all mixed in there.
But I think, Mia, you're doing a great work doing this, because this kind of stuff itself is really a forefront of our activism, because it's really showing who we are, and we are talking about what we do and who we are. And that's really, really important and brilliant. That, you know, you're also, I mean, you're also doing Asian American playwright series, and I mean, those are all important things.
Oh, thanks. You know, it's just about doing what feels right. You know, I
Yeah,
think if we know ourselves, especially if we're artists, if you just have an idea of your own agency, it just comes from there. It's like not even a choice or an effort. You just do it, you
right,
know.
right.
But and speaking of doing it, thank you. We're already at time. We could go on and on.
Oh my
But I want to,
God.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. You have so many great things to say. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to join. I
Yes,
know
you know,
how,
I'm also always happy to come back. So invite me. We could do the other parts of Tatsu's interview sometime in the future.
oh, that sounds great. Okay, cool. And I also wanted to remind you, Tatsu, and everyone that this interview series is becoming a podcast. So
Great.
that's in the process of happening. So that's another way to review this. This video will live on my Facebook page and my YouTube page that you can link to from my website, which is miopark.com. And you can become a Patreon and support this series and important voices like Tatsu's. And that's at patreon.com/miopark. So thank you so much, Tatsu, for joining and
Well,
lending
thank you,
your
Mia, and thank you
wise
for
voice.
everybody for, you know, listening and watching.
Yeah, it sounds good. So everybody take care. Until next time, this has been In Response. Okay, bye-bye.